The 1970s gave Britain some of its boldest luxury cars, powerful V8s, futuristic designs, and engineering far ahead of their time. But some of these brilliant machines came with a devastating price. They were too expensive, too ambitious, or simply arrived at the worst possible moment. Today, we're counting down 10 British cars that pushed their own companies toward financial disaster, and number 1 may be the most unbelievable of them all. Let's begin. Number 10. Rover SD1. Introduced in 1976 by British Leyland, the Rover SD1 was supposed to become Britain's answer to the best executive cars from Germany, and visually, it certainly looked the part. Its dramatic fastback design was modern, spacious, and completely different from the traditional three-box saloons of the time. Under the bonnet, buyers could choose the famous 3.5-liter Rover V8. The combination of performance, comfort, and practicality made the SD1 incredibly appealing. The V8 version was particularly popular with drivers who wanted a fast executive car without buying an expensive German alternative. But the SD1 arrived during one of the most difficult periods in British Leyland's history. Quality control problems, industrial disputes, and production difficulties damaged the car's reputation. The engineering was often impressive. The problem was building the car consistently well. The SD1 wasn't responsible for British Leyland's financial problems, but it became a symbol of the company's struggle to turn good engineering into reliable mass production. Today, the Rover SD1 is remembered as one of Britain's most distinctive executive cars of the 1970s. Number 9. Jaguar XJ Series II arrived in 1973 and continued the elegant formula that had made the XJ one of Britain's most respected luxury saloons. Its long bonnet, graceful body, and luxurious cabin gave it enormous road presence. Buyers could choose powerful 6-cylinder engines, while the V12 versions offered effortless performance. Inside, Jaguar provided polished wood, leather seats, thick carpeting, and the kind of quiet ride expected from a true luxury car. The XJ was loved by executives, celebrities, and wealthy motorists. But behind the beautiful exterior, Jaguar faced serious financial and production problems. The company was operating within the increasingly troubled British Leyland organization, where strikes, rising costs, and production difficulties were becoming major problems. The XJ itself was not a failure. In fact, it was one of Jaguar's greatest successes. But producing such a sophisticated luxury car was expensive. The XJ showed the world what British luxury could be, while also demonstrating how difficult it was for a British manufacturer to make that luxury profitable. Number 8. Jensen Interceptor. The Jensen Interceptor was one of Britain's most extravagant grand tourers. Introduced before the decade but developed throughout the 1970s, it combined British craftsmanship with huge American V8 power. Its Italian-influenced styling gave it a dramatic appearance. Inside was a luxurious cabin filled with leather, wood, and expensive materials. Under the bonnet was a Chrysler V8 capable of delivering effortless performance. For wealthy buyers, the Interceptor offered something unusual. It wasn't simply a sports car, it was a fast, luxurious grand tourer designed to cross Britain at high speed while carrying passengers in comfort. But Jensen was a small manufacturer. Building large V8-powered luxury cars by hand was incredibly expensive. Then came the 1970s fuel crisis. Suddenly, enormous engines and thirsty grand tourers became much harder to sell. Jensen continued developing ambitious products, including the four-wheel drive FF and later the Jensen-Healey. But the financial pressure became too great. Jensen eventually collapsed in 1976. The Interceptor didn't destroy Jensen by itself, but it represented the company's biggest problem perfectly. Jensen was building extraordinary cars on a scale far too small to comfortably survive the economic conditions of the decade. Number 7. Triumph Stag. Few British cars were more promising than the Triumph Stag. Introduced in 1970, it was designed as a sophisticated British convertible grand tourer. Its elegant styling came from Italian designer Giovanni Michelotti. The long bonnet, folding roof, and comfortable 4-seat interior made the Stag look like the perfect car for a stylish summer journey through Britain. Underneath was Triumph's new 3.0-liter V8 engine. On paper, it was exactly what a luxury British convertible needed. The problem was reliability. Cooling problems, timing chain issues, and engine failures damaged the Stag's reputation. Many owners loved the car's design and driving experience, but became frustrated by mechanical problems. And the timing couldn't have been worse. British Leyland was already struggling with industrial disputes, financial pressure, and quality control issues. The Stag became another expensive project that failed to reach its potential. It wasn't the car that caused British Leyland's eventual problems, but it became one of the decade's most famous examples of British engineering being let down by reliability and production difficulties. Today, the Stag has a second life. Specialists have learned how to improve its weaknesses, and restored examples are now highly appreciated.
Number 6. Aston Martin Lagonda. The Aston Martin Lagonda was perhaps the most futuristic British luxury car of the 1970s. When the wedge-shaped design appeared in 1976, it looked almost like something from a science fiction movie. Sharp edges replaced traditional curves. Inside, things became even more futuristic. The Lagonda was planned with digital instruments and advanced electronic controls at a time when most cars still relied on conventional analog gauges. Underneath the dramatic body was Aston Martin's 5.3-liter V8. Performance was strong, while the interior offered hand-finished leather, wood, and traditional British craftsmanship. But the Lagonda was extremely complicated. Its advanced electronics were expensive to develop and difficult to perfect. The car was also enormously expensive. For a small company like Aston Martin, every new development represented a major financial gamble. The Lagonda became famous for its technology and styling, but its limited sales couldn't easily justify the enormous investment required to produce it. Aston Martin itself would continue through periods of financial difficulty and changing ownership. The Lagonda didn't kill the company, but it perfectly represented the dangerous combination of ambition, complexity, and limited production that haunted small British luxury manufacturers.
Number 5. Rolls-Royce Camargue. At number 5 is one of the most controversial Rolls-Royces ever built. The Camargue was introduced in 1975 as an ultra-luxurious two-door Grand Tourer. Its unusual body was designed by Italian coach builder Pininfarina, while the interior remained unmistakably Rolls-Royce. It offered enormous comfort, hand-finished materials, and effortless performance. The car was aimed at extremely wealthy customers who wanted something more exclusive than the standard Rolls-Royce models. But the Camargue was extraordinarily expensive. It was also produced in very small numbers. The 1970s oil crisis made the timing particularly difficult. Luxury cars with large engines suddenly became much harder to justify, even for wealthy customers. The Camargue didn't destroy Rolls-Royce. The company survived and remained one of Britain's greatest luxury names. But the car demonstrated the financial danger of developing an expensive, low-volume model during an economic crisis. For many years, the Camargue remained one of the least appreciated Rolls-Royces. Today, its unusual styling and rarity have made it increasingly interesting to collectors.
Number 4. Aston Martin V8. The Aston Martin V8 was one of the most powerful British luxury cars of the decade. Introduced in 1972, it replaced the earlier DBS V8 as Aston Martin's flagship performance model. Under the bonnet was a hand-built 5.3-liter V8. The car was large, fast, luxurious, and unmistakably British. Its aggressive front end and muscular body gave it an imposing road presence. Inside, Aston Martin continued its traditional approach. Leather, wood, carpeting, and hand finishing were everywhere. For buyers who wanted British performance without sacrificing luxury, the V8 was incredibly desirable. But Aston Martin was still a tiny company. Every car required significant hand finishing. Production costs were high, development was expensive, and the global economy was becoming increasingly hostile to large luxury cars. The oil crisis made powerful V8 cars even harder to sell. Aston Martin survived, but only through periods of financial difficulty and ownership changes. The V8 therefore became both a symbol of Aston Martin's engineering talent and the economic problems facing Britain's independent luxury manufacturers. Number 3. Panther De Ville, at number 3, is one of the strangest luxury cars Britain produced in the 1970s. The Panther De Ville looked as though it had escaped from the 1930s. It featured enormous proportions, upright styling, a tall radiator grille, and an incredibly luxurious interior. But underneath its vintage appearance was much more modern engineering. The car was hand-built by Panther Westwinds, a tiny British manufacturer specializing in unusual luxury vehicles. The De Ville was designed for wealthy customers who wanted something completely different from an ordinary Rolls-Royce or Bentley. Its rarity was part of the attraction. Every car could be individually finished, giving owners a level of exclusivity that mass-produced luxury cars simply couldn't offer. But exclusivity came at a price. Hand-building large luxury cars required enormous amounts of time and money. Production numbers were tiny. Panther Westwinds struggled financially during the 1970s, and its ambitious range of expensive cars became increasingly difficult to sustain. The De Ville wasn't solely responsible for Panther's problems, but it represented the company's risky philosophy perfectly. Build something extraordinary, build very few of them, and hope wealthy customers keep coming.
Number 2. Jensen-Healey. At number 2 is a car that looked like it could have saved Jensen. The Jensen-Healey arrived in 1972 as a modern sports car designed to bring new customers to the company. It was smaller and more affordable than the massive Interceptor. The idea was simple: create a stylish British roadster with strong performance and international appeal. The car featured a 2.0-liter Lotus-designed 4-cylinder engine and a lightweight body. On paper, it had everything Jensen needed, but reality was much more complicated. Early cars suffered from reliability and quality control problems. The Lotus engine could be troublesome, while production issues created additional headaches. For a small company already dealing with high costs, the Jensen-Healey became another difficult project. Instead of providing the financial rescue Jensen desperately needed, it added further pressure. Jensen eventually ceased car production in 1976. The Jensen-Healey therefore became one of the company's great missed opportunities. It had the right idea. It simply arrived in the wrong circumstances.
Number 1. Panther 6. And at number 1 is perhaps the wildest British luxury car of the entire decade. The Panther 6 was a 6-wheeled supercar created by Panther Westwinds. Yes, 6 wheels. The car featured 2 steering axles at the front and a pair of driven wheels at the rear. Its styling looked like something from a futuristic film, and the engine was equally dramatic. A huge Cadillac V8 was mounted behind the driver, with twin turbochargers adding even more performance. The Panther 6 was designed to demonstrate what a tiny British manufacturer could achieve when there were almost no limits. It was outrageous, it was ambitious, and it was incredibly expensive. But there was a problem. Very few customers could afford such a radical machine. Only a tiny number were produced, and the project could never provide the financial stability Panther needed. Panther Westwinds itself struggled with financial problems and eventually changed ownership. The Panther 6 didn't single-handedly destroy the company, but it represents everything that made small British luxury manufacturers vulnerable in the 1970s. Huge ambition, enormous engineering costs, tiny production numbers, and a market that was becoming increasingly difficult. The tragedy is that the Panther 6 wasn't boring, it wasn't ordinary, it wasn't forgettable. It was simply too ambitious for the company behind it, and that is exactly why it takes the number 1 position.
These cars prove that a brilliant idea doesn't always make a successful business. Some were too ambitious, some were too expensive, and some simply arrived at the wrong time. Which one do you think hurt its company the most? Tell me in the comments, and like and subscribe for more forgotten British car stories.